Have you ever wondered what it was like to live on a remote island in Scotland 2,000 years ago? I'm talking not just life off-grid, but pretty much off everything except what they could find in this harsh landscape.
Nettles often grow where ground has been disturbed by humans, as you can see. My word.
Did they cook things by putting hot stones into water, or were Bronze Age burnt mounds actually a byproduct of prehistoric spa treatments? On this remote island off the north coast of Scotland, so much of our history as a species is represented here.
So I didn't have time to see the wartime stuff or the lighthouse properly, so the whole range is like Orkney in microcosm. It's quite extraordinary.
There's so much history yet to explore, from a possible prehistoric burial mound to a 12th century church, through to the burning of seaweed to harvest precious minerals, and the incredible story of a wartime crash landing here.
Every time you go over it, you learn more things. You get another perspective on the site.
This is where I grew up, on the island of Auskerry in the Orkney archipelago. And today we're being visited by an expert archaeologist to help us make more sense of the history of our home. This is On to Other News. An exciting day has arrived. The county archaeologist of the Orkney Islands, Paul Sharman, has agreed to come to Auskerry to check in on the sites here. The archaeological wonders of the island have been logged and mapped by a handful of other archaeologists at different points over the last nearly 100 years, but this is a unique chance to record them from above with my drone. After arriving at the lighthouse end where the pier is, we've come down to our house at the other side of the island.
Only a couple of years ago, when we had particularly very dry weather in the winter, so where there wasn't much vegetation.
We only have a few hours with Paul before he has to get back to Kirkwall on the Orkney mainland. So, after a quick check of the map, we're off out to look at the first site.
Yeah, you can do the burnt mound or something better than a kelp.
Come on, get in it.
Just stop whining, honestly.
This hole in the ground might not look like much, but this is the remains of a kelp pit. In the 1700s, on the island of Stronsay, just 3 miles from Auskerry to the north, a type of seaweed called kelp was discovered to be a very valuable commodity when burnt. This picture was taken on Stronsay around the time that kelp was rapidly replacing grain as Orkney's biggest export. This was particularly big business during the Napoleonic Wars in the early 1800s, and because no one lived permanently on Auskerry at that time, people from Stronsay would come to Auskerry to burn it and then collect the ash.
This is pup geo, named by Simon, because so many seal pups get born here.
The industry has long since died off, but our flock of North Ronaldsays sheep are probably happy they don't have to share their favourite food source anymore.
Since there was no habitation here between what he reckoned was the 12th century with the chapel and the remains there to when the keepers, they built the lighthouse. He said that the only reason that any names would survive was because of the fishermen using them as marks.
Yes, that seems absolutely reasonable.
He kept saying things about the hermits and stuff, and I was like, but not hermits in the way we think of them, seeing as they were here for hundreds of years.
Paul has never been to Auskerry before, but he's been the county archaeologist since 2023 and has spent a lot of his working life in Orkney exploring some of the most amazing sites on the other islands.
Wow, this is some stone beach.
Defined as a low-rounded ridge of coarse gravel or shingle at the inner margin of a beach beyond the reach of ordinary waves, this is a storm beach.
And when we had that big storm and everything was obliterated and stones were flung up almost as far as the fence. Quite a lot of stones were.
Wow.
It was about 10 years ago, maybe a bit less. And all the paths were eradicated and they were rebuilt so quickly, you wouldn't believe it.
Essentially, this is a visual representation of the sheer quantity and ferocity of the winter storms this place gets. The top of the beach is so flat that, bizarrely, this is the most comfortable place on the island to ride on the quad bike. That was not a luxury afforded to those peoples who lived here thousands of years ago, who somehow withstood the often brutal weather here with very few luxuries.
No, we're going to look at this. Is this a grate? No, standing stone.
Oh, so it's fallen over.
The official record of this prehistoric standing stone and all other sites on the island can be found on the free website Canmore. The record is largely compiled from the careful notes and interpretations of the late Professor Raymond Lamb, who was a local archaeologist, when he visited in 1983, when my parents were newly married and building their life here.
If you top them all up, it was a standing stone over 3 metres in height. Its claims around it is a rectangular enclosure, which I'm not entirely sure of. So most of these things are essentially as described, which is great. It means they've survived really well, they've not been eroded away.
Not all the standing stones here are prehistoric, however. This one at the top of the hill was diligently dug into the ground by my dad. He claimed to have put it up for my mum. It's certainly a unique romantic gesture, if that really was the motivation.
Trees' tower.
With the record of that site renewed with a new picture,
It's taller even than you.
we head just a few hundred metres away to the site of what could be our prehistoric burial mound. A previous archaeological report describes this as an apparently artificial 55-foot diameter mound with a remarkable absence of stones.
Possible Neolithic tomb, possibly. Similar scenario of a mound by the sea that's a bit like where Isbister Tomb of the Eagles is, but of course there's no holes in it, so we can't tell if it's a tomb or not. But its location is very similar.
The mound stands close to a complex of earthworks, probably prehistoric enclosures, but without excavation, no one can ever be certain they're linked. If you're enjoying this video, please do give it a like and subscribe for more. Your support for this channel makes it possible for me to spend the time editing the videos, and I absolutely love all your comments, so do keep them coming.
Because immediately you can see something, oh look, short turf.
Yeah.
What's going on here in the foreground?
It's quite a big area. Well, fantastic position.
Yeah.
We're now off to see one of the most impressive sites on the island, the Iron Age settlement. As you might have seen in the previous episode, this is one of the most visually striking on the island, and it may be one of the most significant.
Nettles often grow where ground has been disturbed by humans, as you can see. And the introduction of Plantago lanceolata, plantain.
Okay,
But you know, the things you wound up as a knot and fired at people as a kid, that's always indicative of humans in the landscape. My word. So you can see an upright or two that are still set fast, right there and there. There's an upright.
That'll be the door.
Kinda, yeah.
Paul is consulting the previous records of these sites and then casting his expert eye to give his own observations about what it all means. He's been very clear with us that you can't be certain with a lot of this. Painting a picture of prehistoric life is not an exact science, even if you're able to excavate. And here on Auskerry, because none of the sites are threatened imminently by development or coastal erosion, there is no motivation for anyone to pay for these sites to be dug up, but maybe one day.
Unless they were doing circular cells, which they might be if they were Pictish monks. But oh, I'd love to get my hands on it. We're kind of going prehistoric, but you could have, if you think of Iron Age structures, especially Pictish ones where you have circular cells, they would all have roofs that gradually come in, corbelled roofs that come in, and as they collapse they would leave a circular pattern.
Yes.
So that kind of way you're thinking is I think correct, you know, that you're actually seeing possibly a multicellular structure in here, which is why you've got what look like circles within it.
And then the outlying bit would be dwelling as well, or where the green flatness
As
is,
the
there's
green
still stones
slope
in
goes
there.
down, you could well have, you know, that's the kind of yard bit. Why that's got irises in it is because there's clay in it, or either clay in the structure or clay on the floors underneath that's then stopping water seeping out.
Structural.
And nobody can prove me otherwise. Yet. That mound, burnt mound. Ooh, prime site.
This is our Bronze Age burnt mound, an enigmatic prehistoric feature if ever there was one. That's because there are a few very different possible interpretations on what they indicate about what life here was once like.
Kind of 2000, 1900 BC through to about 1800 BC.
Yeah.
And have you ever been to the one near Tomb of the Eagles?
Yes, I have. That's what, I very much is in my mind.
So that's a prime. I think there's only 2 ever been excavated in Orkney, I think. Somebody did their PhD on using the burnt stone in burnt mounds, especially in Edy, there's quite a few, and using various thermoluminescent dating techniques. So when they were burnt, the minerals in them reoriented themselves to magnetic north at the time.
Oh.
So,
Wow.
and if they've never been exposed to daylight again, they stay fossilised to that orientation until you show them up.
That's amazing.
That's what this person was trying to investigate. Could it be used on burnt stone and try and date them?
And when you see Hamish's aerial shot, the crescent is quite clear.
This would be lovely. The biggest burnt mound in the whole of Scotland is on Fair Isle, and it's absolutely enormous. It's really big.
Wow.
It's 2-3 times the size of this and the height of it as well. It's absolutely huge. It could be fire cracked, indeed. But yeah, it's exactly the right shape.
And this would be some sort of structure, house structure, or?
Yes, so sometimes you do have houses with, well, it depends how you define a house. You'll get a building, often with a central trough, which is clay luted so it'll hold water, and then you've also got a fire, decent fire-sized hearth, where you heat the stones, throw them in the water to heat it up. That, of course, cracks the stones. You throw the cracked stones behind you, creates the mound, and so it just builds up and builds up. There have been experiments done. It's the sauna, essentially, or a sweat lodge, since we want to go slightly more prehistoric. But so everybody's going, oh, Indian sweat lodges. You need a lot of heated water for felting, for processing wool. Yeah, so not for spinning, but for felting. You can also heat the water for cooking. And Val Turner, the Shetland archaeologist, her husband was filmed bathing in one after they'd cooked in it or something like that. When they had one on Bresser, I think, on the shoreline of Bresser. So they moved that one as well once they'd dug it. But so it could be all those things, like at different times of year, because you'd only be felting at a certain time of year potentially once you've rued the sheep to get the wool. There's all that kind of thing could be going on at the same place, which is why you get such big heaps of cracked stone.
That makes, of course, great sense. If you've got a big stone, if you've got a big water
if you've made the
container,
effort to build something.
of course you'd multi-use it.
Yeah.
Dyeing maybe as well. Do they do any dyeing then? No, not really.
Plant dyes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. There's I think plant dyes both on hides and on wool and felt that have been just little bits preserved, but who knows? But it was clearly coloured. And they're living in a multicoloured world. I mean, as Nessa Brogger has shown, where they're using ochre, both red and yellow, to actually put on their walls, and you've got little bits of ochre and things like that in cracks in some of that geometric designs they're having out there. So, yeah, multicoloured world. It's not a dull brown or monochrome.
Brilliant. So the fact that this structure, presumably with the tank potentially underneath it, isn't down near the wettest part. Presumably
gonna
it's
say.
because there was water draining off the hill more.
Yes, it'll be water draining off the hill because you can see a little gully there,
Yeah.
and it's leading into that wet boggy bit. So there's your source of fresh water, and of course they knew how to kind of filter it, or they could have just dug a well beside it to clarify the water, you know, so you can either filter through sand or you can just let it settle for a little bit once you've put water back in it, and then get it out again.
Which is
So there's-
exactly what Owen's
yeah.
done with our drinking water.
Yeah. So there you go. Yeah. So that always works.
We've certainly got our steps in this afternoon as we head up the hill for the last of our standing stones of the day. This one is prehistoric and poses many questions about why it was put up and what it signifies.
Oh, look at the notch. That's interesting, isn't it? So, yes, you could have had another stone here with those as the packing stones similar to that. No question. The idea is it could be a space that's oriented towards the lighthouse, if you're into ley lines, but oriented to something else potentially that you're walking through. And again, they'll never be proved. Nobody
No,
will
of
ever
course they
prove that. But why are you having a pair?
In the middle of everywhere, yeah.
It's been fantastic. It's the first time I've been to Auskerry, and the preservation is marvellous. It's really good. I mean, the stonework is extraordinary. The range of periods of sites are extraordinary. You seem to have from Neolithic, possibly, certainly Bronze Age, through to medieval chapel. I didn't have time to see the wartime stuff or the lighthouse properly, so the whole range is like Orkney in microcosm. It's quite extraordinary.
Paul's time on Auskerry isn't actually done yet. In the next episode, he'll get to hear about the incredible story of a Canadian pilot crash landing here in 1943, and then my mum's amazing efforts to track him down, and, despite me not remembering it in great detail, him coming back to revisit the exact spot where he came down. And there's a lot more history of the much older variety too. Plus, Dad joins the adventure remotely.
It looks, honestly, I know that the colouring that the camera's brought up, it looks a bit false to me. It looks too green and too ebullient.
I don't think it is though. I think it is the colour's very bright.
But it is lovely to see it.
Yeah.
In the meantime, thanks for watching this episode. I'll see you on the next one. Cheerio.